What's poppin', mi gente? Your boy's back with another video. Now, just like the title suggests, this video is almost completely going to be dedicated to discussing the effect used when Dracula teleports in the prologue. And the reason behind that is this is a very intricate and involved effect that uses multiple blend modes, different gradients, and I'm pretty sure the way they did it originally was to do what's called drawing to a render or surface, which, long story made short, normally when an effect is done in a game, it's drawn directly to the screen so you can see it. This type of effect, there are effects though that are done in the background, drawn to another type of surface or render, which is basically a canvas that is captured by the camera and is not initially shown on screen, and then whatever magic, as I call it, that has to be done to that resulting effect is done, and then it's displayed to the screen afterwards. And this can result in a lot of very interesting effects. But I am going to discuss that in this video, so if you're not particularly interested in this effect, not curious about the technical aspects of it or how it's done, you might as well click off right now, because other than a quick preview of the dialog box and maybe the new upgraded legacy display for Richter, which is still work in progress, there just isn't much more to see here to save you all some time. Before we dive in, some background information. The original Symphony of the Night basically uses 4 blend modes. There's the regular type of blending, which is what you'd see on the majority of things like skeletons, backgrounds, etc. There's something called additive blending, and this is basically an effect that'll make the sprite look more transparent and a bit brighter. Think of the light you see around candles, like the blue candles, for example. That blue ring you see around the candle sprite, that's actually an additive sprite. It's designed to simulate lighting, because the PlayStation obviously couldn't simulate ambient lighting well enough that it would have been something that could have been used all over the game without slowing it to a crawl. So they use additive blending to kind of do a mock lighting type of effect with sprites, which is ingenious. There's subtractive blending, which will make things look darker or more black. I'm not really sure how to explain this one. It really isn't used too much in the game. The best example I can think of right now at the top of my head would be when the player is cursed or poisoned. That overlay you see that has some odd colors and looks darker, that uses subtractive blending. And the final one, I'm not 100% sure whether to call this multiplicative or overlay blending. I'm leaning more towards overlay blending. I think that's what it is. And this particular one isn't one that, at least in all of my research and all of my testing, that I could ever find a way to manually enable. Like, I can go to any enemy and set one numeric value and make him use additive blending or subtractive blending. But when it came to overlay blending, I just could not find a way to do that. And I'm thinking that's because in the original game, they probably had to draw those kinds of sprites to what I mentioned a minute or two ago, which is a surface or a separate render, and then do whatever they need to do video processing wise to it, and then display it to the screen. I could probably go into more detail here, but considering I spent 2 minutes just talking about blend modes here, I don't really think it's necessary. So without further ado, let's dive in. I'm going to show you guys the original effect in regular speed, and then I'm going to show you in slow motion and discuss breaking it up bit by bit, and I'm going to discuss it by breaking it up bit by bit, excuse me, so that it doesn't seem like I'm throwing too much at you all, and then I'll go ahead and show you the resulting effect that I created within Unity. Alright, so first is that initial pillar. It's 2 pixels wide and extends out to 12 pixels altogether, I believe, and uses this randomly generated Tutti Frutti kind of effect. By Tutti Frutti, I mean it's individual vertical columns of various colored pixels, with each column being one color, to create this kind of rainbow effect, and it uses additive blending. Now what they do here is they actually draw it over and over, wider and wider, until it reaches 12 pixels, and then we get another rounded effect that starts scaling up from the floor upwards until it goes off screen. And you can see that effect right now, and you can again see that, as I call it, Tutti Frutti kind of color effect. But this second part of the effect almost seems like it might be a 3D object, and I say that because if you look at the top rounded part and then go down, you'll notice there seem to be other rows of rounded bits that get blurrier and blurrier. But if you look at those rounded parts, you'll notice they tend to straighten out, which is what leads me to believe that originally this was a quad or a plane of some kind that just had a square texture on it, and then had a hole cut into that square texture in the top to give it that rounded look. I'm not 100% sure on that, but the bottom line is this can be reproduced with a simple 2D sprite, so I didn't bother to try to figure out the exact specifics of it because it just wasn't necessary and it was overkill. But this effect, it's actually ingenious what they do with this because they're going to have it scale upward, and then they're going to have another gradient actually faded in over this Tutti Frutti one as that Tutti Frutti one fades out. Yes, I know that name sounds funny, Tutti Frutti, whatever. These use additive blending, by the way, but it's almost unnoticeable in-game because it happens so fast. But take a look. See how we've got all colors there, and you can see that effect a lot clearer now. Now watch what's going to happen. See how it's turning grayer from the bottom up? Now you see how it's all gray? That's because another gradient was drawn over it as the original was faded out. Now what they're going to do next is, and this part's hard to see unless you can zoom in, especially on a dark background, but what's going to happen is they're going to draw a subtractive overlay underneath this additive gradient. Now anybody who knows anything about color blending will go, well, aren't those two going to cancel each other out? And they have a solution to that, and that is to draw yet another one of these gray gradients underneath the current one, but over the black one. But that one is going to use what's called multiplicative or overlay blending. I'm not sure what the correct term is there. If anybody wants to comment down below, feel free to educate me on this, because again, this is a huge learning experience for myself, and I'm sure somebody else out there could learn from this as well. But it's going to create this unique kind of effect where the gradient is still going to seem like it has some brightness to it, but then it's going to seem like it fades out from the sides. It gets dimmer and dimmer and fades out with the middle fading out last. And you're going to see what happens right about now when I stop applying pressure to the box here, or when I take focus off it. You see how it looks like it's getting darker and darker and the edges seem to be getting darker first? That's because that additive overlay was faded out while this other... excuse me, that's what happened because that additive gradient was faded out while the black subtractive box was drawn underneath with this other gradient that uses overlay blending. And you can see the effect now. It almost looks like it's scaling down, but it's not scaling down, trust me. It's fading out. And it's fading into the black. And now there's nothing else too special here. Dracula is drawn underneath with a black overlay over him that's just faded out at the same time, or faded out right after this black rectangle is faded out. And you'll see what I mean here. He's going to show up all black. And that's all. You see how he's getting brighter and brighter? There's nothing fancy there. However, when he actually teleports out is when things get a lot more complex, because they do this ingenious thing of changing the blend mode used on Dracula's sprite itself, but they mask it in a way that you won't even notice it. And you're going to see what I mean right about now. Or I should say a frame from now. You might want to take a screenshot here because otherwise this is hard to notice unless you want to rewind the video. But you're going to notice his colors are suddenly going to change a frame or two from now. And he's going to suddenly get a little dimmer and his colors are going to just look funny. Right about there, you can see it easily. That's because they just changed his blending to be multiplicative or overlay type underneath these gradients and all these other effects. And what it's going to do is it's going to create this effect where as this gradient is faded out and as the additive one is faded out and as he is faded out, it's going to make him look like he almost blends into the black part in the background until he disappears. And you can see it here and here. It looks like colors are being deleted and it looks like he's perfectly blended in with that black background. And now all that's going to happen is that black background is going to fade out. Dracula's already been made invisible underneath it. And that's that. That's the original effect. Very intricate. There's a lot involved in it. So, my original effect that I made in GM was close, but it had some flaws in it. And I took that same effect and basically rewrote the code for Unity and imported it in, but of course the same flaws were still present, so I redid the effect. It took me about 8 hours to get it right. The hardest part being I had to figure everything out, but let's take a look at that and see how it turned out. And again, I'll show you it played in normal speed, and then I'll show you it in slow-mo to discuss what I've done here.
Dracula, die now and leave this world. You'll never belong here.
Oh, but this world invited me. Your own kind called me forth with praise and tribute.
Tribute? You're a thief. You steal men's souls, their freedom.
Freedom is always sacrificed to faith, good hunter. Or are you truly here by choice?
All I'm here for is you. To hell with your heresy! You're nothing but a blight on mankind.
Ha! Mankind. A cesspit of hatred and lies. Fight for them then, and die for their sins!
Okay, so first up, for those who haven't noticed, the colors do look darker in this part of the video where I'm showing the results within Unity, only because I'm now capturing from a different monitor. So no, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you if you suddenly felt like things got a little darker on screen. The other thing I did was I went ahead and added a blue background here so that it's easier to compare with the original. I will also say this up front. The original game is obviously 20 years old. Unity obviously uses much newer technology, which makes things blend and mesh just so much better. The original one, you could see all kinds of flaws on the original. You could just see all kinds of flaws on the effect, pixelation, distortion. That's not the case here. So when you look at this, understand I'm not using any kind of high-res gradients. These gradients are very small. Like, we're talking less than 128 pixels in size. Okay, but they're going to look very high-res, and everything is just going to blend better to make it so that the effect just looks so much more glorious, I guess is the only way I can put it. I'm dragging on and on here, so let's get to the point. First, the initial light pillar, which instead of using 6 different objects to draw it over itself 6 times, I just brightened it more and scaled it out some, and you get the same resulting effect. Then you have what I call the Tutti Frutti curved light pillar, which pops up, gets brighter and brighter, up until around this point. And then we have the additive gray gradient that's going to be drawn over that as the Tutti Frutti pillar is faded out, and you're going to notice they blend so well it almost looks like the light of heaven is shining down on Dracula. Now here is where Dracula's shader is going to change to use overlay blending, but you're going to notice you're barely going to be able to see any change in color on him. And that's again because Unity's tech is so much more updated. You can see, if you look very carefully, minor color changes, but this is unnoticeable in game, which is huge to me because it just makes the effect blend that much better. And now we have a gray pillar that uses overlay blending, and that black subtractive blending pillar that are going to be faded, and you're going to notice it's going to get a little dimmer here. And you look how Dracula looks like he's already disappearing into the background there. Almost like he's melting into the darkness as the light closes on him. And you see we get that same effect where the gray bit almost looks like it's scaling down, but in reality that's just the brightness going down more and more. And you see Dracula disappear in there. It looks sudden, but that's because I just clicked over a lot. But he slowly fades into it until he's just totally gone, basically. And then we have an all black pillar, and that black pillar, of course, is going to then fade out as well. And that's that. Also, I put in something new to skip conversations because I didn't like in the original game how you skip a conversation and then the animations for, let's say, Dracula would keep playing, or if you were meeting with Maria, you'd have to wait for her to walk off screen. And I felt like it should cancel instantly, so I put in a quicker way of canceling dialogue. Check it out. And that's it. Nothing too fancy there, but again, I wanted to give you guys a quick preview of the dialogue. I mean, as you can see, I use much higher res text now. There's a picture of Rondo Richter in there, which I've been wanting to do for a long time. It always irked me how his Symphony of the Night picture was used in the beginning, and it felt like that was a bit of laziness on their part. But I mean, again, with how many effects they put into the game, I can't really complain. Alright, so that's it. A couple of quick final notes here. The HUD you see being shown here is work in progress. It has not been finalized yet, so don't let that concern you. The demo is looming on the horizon. I keep saying between 2 to 3 months, but at this point it's more like 2 months because I've got most of the stuff done already. I'm going to put an updated list on this post of what still needs to be completed. I am currently seeking sprite artists, so if anybody knows of any skilled, reliable artists, by all means, have them reach out to me. The best way to do it is probably to message me on Patreon, as I check that frequently. If there are any graphics or effects specialists who see this video and have any tips for me, critiques, by all means, leave a comment down below. This has been a learning experience for me, and I'm definitely interested in learning a lot more. Other than that, join the Patreon page if you're not a supporter, or you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. The link will be down in the video description, along with a link to the forums and the Facebook group for anybody who wants to talk to other like-minded Castlevania fans. I also want to, as always, thank my Patreon supporters. You guys have been amazing here. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate all of you, in particular in the last couple of weeks have been joining up. I mean, you may not think your $5, $10 makes a difference, but I mean, if 10, 20 you join up in a month, and then another 10, 20 the month afterwards, that really does add up quickly. So, thank you all again. I understand we're going through some crazy times right now, and life may not be the easiest for some of you, so keep your head up. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy out there, definitely. Oh, and again, I want to reiterate that if you want to get access to the alpha version of the demo, you want to become a Patreon supporter now, because anybody who's going to get access to it is going to have been a member for at least 3 months, no exceptions. With the first group to get it to be anybody who's donated $100 or more total. Those are going to be the early access people. A couple of weeks later, the rest of my Patreon supporters who have been members for 3 months or more will then get it. And then about a month after that, everybody else and the general public will have access to a demo of the project as well. After this one is released, the next step is to go ahead and do one that's going to involve Alucard as well, which will probably be 2 or 3 months more after this alpha demo is released. And then, well, from then on, we'll talk about that when we come to that point, what's next. But I'm going to jump off here. I hope this video has been informative and not too all over the place, as I've been hardwired on coffee for most of it. And again, I hope that you're all doing well out there. I'll talk to everybody soon. Deuces.